Over the last several months, we have seen a variety of legal challenges confronting former President Donald Trump. Among the most serious of those has been unfolding in Washington, where federal prosecutors have been investigating the retention of classified documents at his Florida estate Mar-a-Lago, and also investigating potential efforts by Donald Trump and his representatives to obstruct government efforts to retrieve those documents. In January 2021, as Donald Trump was leaving the White House, boxes of thousands of government records, including what we now know to be hundreds of classified documents, were packed in boxes and taken to Donald Trump's Florida home, Mar-a-Lago. And it became clear to the National Archives and Records Administration that it was missing a variety of documents that it believed it was entitled to have back because they were government records. And that began a months-long negotiation process by the government to obtain the documents. The investigation really takes a very dramatic turn in January of 2022 when the National Archives receives from Mar-a-Lago 15 boxes of records, and when it opens those records, it discovers more than 100 bearing classified markings. At that point, it alerts the Justice Department to the disclosure and discovery of classified records. The Justice Department at that point becomes involved, and months later, it issues a subpoena to the Trump orbit, seeking the return of any and all classified documents that remain in his possession. And this is, again, where the investigation truly escalates, because the Justice Department goes to Mar-a-Lago to collect what it believes to be the entirety of the classified records. It receives roughly 3 dozen. And it obtains information leading investigators to believe that there are yet many more that still remain. In August, specifically August 8th, 2022, the FBI searches Mar-a-Lago armed with a search warrant, and at that point retrieves roughly 100 documents bearing classified markings. And in addition, the assertion, which wound up being false, that all of the documents in Donald Trump's possession had in fact been returned, that wound up not being the case, and the Justice Department came to believe that it might have evidence of potential obstruction, which is in and of itself a crime too. So the mishandling, or what we call the willful retention of national defense information, and obstruction are felonies that carry years in prison, but this is a federal case, and that infuses it with a degree of gravity that is notable. Although prosecutions of defendants for mishandling classified documents are routine, there is nothing routine about this particular investigation. The politics of it are truly extraordinary and unprecedented. In addition to this being the first federal case against a former president, this is also the first federal case against a leading presidential candidate. And adding to the complexity is this is being brought by the Biden administration Justice Department, and of course President Joe Biden is again seeking re-election, and there is the potential for a rematch against Donald Trump. Now, the Biden administration Justice Department sought months ago to insulate itself from claims of any sort of political meddling or bias or motivation by appointing a special counsel from outside the department, someone by the name of Jack Smith. But there's no question that Trump, as this case moves forward, will look to try to undermine it by claiming that this is an example of political persecution.
Ernie Rudolph with the West Side Conservative.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. You have a big crowd. Sam Clovis said hello.
I'm Mike Balsamo. I'm the U.S. law enforcement editor for the Associated Press. Former President Donald Trump says he's been indicted in connection with mishandling of classified records as part of a long-running Justice Department investigation. This investigation involves a Justice Department special counsel, Jack Smith, who has been conducting this investigation with a grand jury here at the federal courthouse in Miami. A second grand jury had been meeting in the federal court in Washington, D.C., hearing from multiple witnesses. This is arguably the most legal trouble the former president has faced despite the fact that he was indicted on separate charges in New York City and faces a multitude of other investigations, including a second special counsel investigation related to conduct tied to the 2020 presidential election. The former president says he's expected to appear here in federal court in Miami on Tuesday afternoon. A person familiar with the matter told the AP that the indictment against Trump includes 7 counts, and 2 people familiar with the matter told the AP that Trump's legal team was informed shortly before he publicly announced his own indictment on his own social media platform, Truth Social.
It's election interference at the highest level. There's never been anything like what's happened. I'm an innocent man. I'm an innocent person. We can't let this continue to go on because it's ripping our country to shreds. We have such big problems, and this shouldn't be one of them. It's a hoax. The whole thing is a hoax, just like Russia, just like the fake dossier was a hoax.
Trump's expected to appear at 2 events over the weekend. It's unclear whether or not he'll keep those events on his schedule, given this announcement. We have not heard yet from the Justice Department about this indictment. We have only heard from the former president.
This is a hugely significant development. It's the first time in American history that a former president has been indicted on federal charges, and it comes shortly on the heels of the first time in American history that a former president had been indicted on state charges. The walls around former President Trump are closing in from a legal perspective. These are very serious charges, and they're also the kind of charges that, if the federal prosecutors and the Department of Justice are bringing them, as they clearly now are likely to be particularly easy to prove if, in fact, the Department of Justice has decided that these are charges that they want to bring, which they have. Well, if you lie to federal prosecutors, it doesn't matter if you're the former president of the United States. And that's actually, while this is a serious and somber occasion, it's actually an example of one of the positives of America: accountability to the rule of law, even at the highest levels. And in fact, it was striking to witness that when he was indicted in New York on the charges arising out of the Stormy Daniels affair and the classification of those expenditures, his poll numbers actually improved. Now, is that causation or is it merely correlation? It's very, very difficult to say. But one thing that we have learned over the last couple of years in particular is that the normal rules, the normal political assumptions that apply seemingly don't apply in the same way to Donald Trump. His supporters rallied around him after those New York charges. It will be interesting to see what not only his supporters, but his fellow Republicans in Congress and his fellow Republican candidates for the presidency have to say about this in the coming days. Now, does it mean that he can't run for president? No. We live in a country where, in the United States, rightly or wrongly, a convicted felon, even if he's convicted, can be elected president. He could even, in theory, serve as president while incarcerated. So he announced on one of his social media platforms, he released a video, and of course, it's straight out of the Donald Trump playbook. It's, this is a hoax, they're attacking me, this is a political vendetta, it's a witch hunt. It's the usual repertoire of his comments.